Welcome back. I'm talking with Thom Knoles, a master teacher of Vedic meditation who's trained over 20,000 students worldwide. And he's telling us about sitting ourselves down twice a day and meditating, and how profound changes can happen in our well-being and our stress levels and our health. So, Thom, tell us about the very first time you meditated. What was that like? How old were you, and who taught you?
I was 16 years old when I learned to meditate, and I was taught by a great Indian master by the name of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. And it was a fabulous experience for me. I started off in the first few minutes thinking, well, here I am silently and effortlessly in my mind repeating this meaningless word, which I was told to do, and I wonder what's going to happen next. And the master had said to me, you know, if you feel that you're beginning to forget to repeat it, don't try to hold on, let go. So I went ahead and did that, expecting simply to end up in everyday thoughts. And instead, what happened was that a few moments later, out of a silent space, he said to me, open your eyes now. And it turned out 15 minutes had gone by, and I was rather surprised by that. And I wasn't sure if I'd been asleep, but I apparently hadn't, because my head was still upright. So that was an interesting experience, getting to a place where there was no thought. And that seems to be what happens with most new meditators that I teach.
Wow. And so, how did you, were you in India with him, or was he in America?
He was in America. He came to the United States. My father was a general in the U.S. Air Force and was stationed at the Pentagon, and I was in Washington, D.C. And, Maharishi had come to the United States and was teaching around in the U.S. He gave a lecture at one of the major universities in Washington, which I attended. And it was just an open course for people who would like to learn how to meditate. And I learned with him, and it turned out to be a pivotal moment in my life, because it was what actually ended up being my career. I had no idea that's what I was going to end up teaching in my life, but I always had a sense I'd be teaching something.
Well, that's amazing. So over the next 4 years, I mean, you started teaching on a big scale. Is that?
I did, and after following him back to India and taking my teacher training, I set out on my own and began teaching in the way that I'd been instructed to do. And people, first of all, began coming by the 10s and 20s, but each one of those had a friend who heard about what fabulous results their friends were getting, and the numbers rapidly grew into the hundreds, and then within a few years to the thousands.
That's remarkable. Now, what do you suggest for people who, have a mind that never stops thinking? And, is it possible for them to quiet their minds and allow or trust the mantra to work?
Beth, I think the interesting thing is that people whose minds are thinking rapidly, that means they have lots of thoughts per minute. If they analyze the theme of what they're thinking about, the mind is quickly dispensing with one thought and moving quickly on to another, and dispensing with that and moving quickly on to another. And there's a theme there. The mind is looking for happiness. It's looking for greater charm. It's looking for greater satisfaction. And finding each thought unsatisfactory quickly moves on to the next. So the mind that moves rapidly, rather horizontally along the surface of the lake of the mind, if you think of the mind as a lake, if you give that person a mantra or sound that is good for them to meditate with, then when they think that word, then their mind will quickly move, as it were, down the rungs of the ladder. It'll move just as rapidly inward as it moved around on the surface. It will move very quickly into those more and more charming, more and more subtle impulses of the sound of that mental word that they're thinking, their mantra, as we call it, and arrive at the state of being. My experience is that people who have high-volume thinking are also people whose minds are ready to meditate. And so once they get a little glimpse into the possibility, the mind will go straight inward right away.
I was surprised to learn this from you, that if you're already a meditator, like I was, I got a TM and then a primordial sound mantra, but that you say that, if you got that several years ago, you're sort of a different person now, and it's good to get an upgrade. And I thought that was really great news, and people, I think, are not aware of that. So if people want more information to find out teachers in their area, they can go to VedicNetwork.com. But can you talk about that new upgrading of the mantra?
As you know, Beth, it's a crude juxtaposition to say it this way, but it's one that everybody will understand. If you're at a stationary position in your stick-shift car, you have to use first gear to get up to a certain speed. But once you're at that speed, if you wish to go faster towards your goal, you learn how to shift to second and to third and so on. But you can only shift into those gears at a certain speed. Likewise, in meditation, one develops a certain degree of inner experience and development. One gains a certain capacity for the sustaining of that deep inner silence. And consequently, as one has progressed through one's life, it's important to regularly examine the possibility of advanced techniques that are suitable to the level at which one finds oneself in meditation.
That's a good point.
And of course, I recommend that someone, that you need to take the wise and trusted counsel of an experienced Vedic meditation teacher. And as you said, those can be found on VedicNetwork.com.
Fabulous. Now, I understand you're writing a book on omnipresence. Can you share a little bit about that with us?
All right. Hold on to your hats, everyone. This gets a little bit deep, but I'll try to make it as simple as possible. The idea basically is this. The word omnipresent means something which absolutely is everywhere, without exception everywhere. That being true, if there is one thing omnipresent, then all things are part of that one thing. That means all things are in fact that one same thing. In quantum mechanics and physics, it's able to be demonstrated beyond reasonable doubt that there's really only one indivisible whole thing. There's a unified field that's been shown to be conscious in nature. All of us are part of that. That is the omnipresent. Now, what are we doing about it? We have this knowledge intellectually, we have it experientially, we have it from lab physics, that there's really one indivisible whole conscious field of which all of us are wave functions or manifestations. We need to be doing something about that fact. We need to stop behaving as if we're all separate individual non-selves, behaving towards each other as if we are, separate, distinct things and not really taking regard of our oneness or our unity.
So are you saying that when we meditate, we more easily tap into the unified field?
Yes, that's exactly what happens, because our own least excited consciousness state, the quietest state of our own mind, is in fact the unified field itself. It's not that each one of us has an individual little place inside of us that's quiet, but it has nothing to do with other people's quiet place. That quiet place that's deep inside of you, Beth, and as deep inside of me and deep inside of each of your listeners, is one indivisible whole conscious field. When our mind touches that place during meditation, then we become more and more familiar with that place. We start to become more familiar with that, and it's incorporated spontaneously into our sense of identity, not just who we are, but what we are. And that's naturally going to change the way we behave toward the outer world as that experience is integrated into our daily waking state.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned that, you said that I think that human beings only use 2% of our brains. Do you think that by meditating we're expanding the percentage of use?
I love to quote that thing about chronic brain failure being a collective phenomenon, and it's a unique achievement of the human species that it should be so, that it's a fact that on average, the pessimists say we use about 2%, the optimists say we use about 10% of our available brain power. And we're convinced, by the way, that it is due to accumulation of stress that it is so. It is not unlike the way that a powerful computer, a powerful home laptop computer, might become very slow and very sluggish if it's loaded up with all kinds of unnecessary and irrelevant programs. So that it's not really that the computer itself is slow, it's just that it's clogged up with useless information. Our brains and bodies will accumulate the lasting effect of stress, and what that does is it clogs up our brain and our brain's computing power with all kinds of unnecessary information about responses that we've had in the past to overloads of experience, stressful experiences that we've accumulated. And as we meditate, those layers of stress, due to the deep restfulness of meditation, those layers of stress are peeled away layer by layer until eventually, literally, the meditator, after a few years' practice, runs out of stress. We deplete the inventory of accumulated stress, and as we're doing so, this liberates more and more of our available brain power.
And you say that you need very little sleep as a result.
I've found this, and I've found it in my students, too. I remember marveling over it in my own master, seeing when I first met him, him working 22 hours a day and resting for 2 hours at a middle of the night from 2 till 4 a.m. But I found that over the years, as I practiced, a very similar thing happened to me, that my background level of restfulness became greater. I would say that it's fair to say, and I'm certain that it's so, that while I'm speaking to you now, my body is resting more deeply than most people's bodies are when they're asleep. And yet I'm fully active here, speaking and thinking and engaged. When I do rest in the night, 2 to 3 hours each night, I find that that's completely sufficient horizontal time to rest my body. And I find that as people practice Vedic meditation, that with each passing year, they'll discover, just as demands are made on them and they have certain nights where they have to stay up late or they have to get up early or both, that their requirement for lying down for hours and hours becomes less and less, provided that they continue their regular twice daily practice of meditation.
Hey, Thom, I'm sorry, it was fascinating. We're out of time, but thank you so much for being on the show.
Well, Beth, thank you so much, and my greetings to all your listeners.
Great. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you here next week. I'm Beth Greer.